I anticipated my wife was plotting a divorce of our marriage, so I transferred my holdings. 2 weeks later, she initiated the filing, only to retreat when her scheme ultimately collapsed. I've been perusing the accounts here for quite a while, convinced I'd never possess a narrative of my own. Yet life has a tendency to astonish you, and I've been carrying this burden for months. I need to unburden myself. To be perfectly clear, I've never been the type to hastily draw conclusions or expect the worst. My wife, let's call her M, and I had been a couple for 6 years, married for 4. Things were stable, or so I assumed. We experienced the usual fluctuations, but nothing that suggested a serious issue. Actually, for the bulk of our partnership, we were that perfectly devoted pair. We shared laughs over foolish in-jokes, debated endlessly about movie choices, and had an understanding that simply clicked. She'd put together elaborate outings, and I'd treat her to her favorite carry-out after a demanding day. It felt effortless, like we'd mastered the art of love. That's precisely why the subsequent events shocked me profoundly. About 6 months ago, things began to shift. Initially, it was insignificant nuances, easily missed if you weren't observing closely. She started taking her mobile device everywhere, even just stepping into the kitchen or folding laundry. Previously, her phone would remain on the coffee table for hours, and she never minded who handled it. One day, I quipped, "Running some clandestine operation, are we?" She giggled and responded, "No, work has just been sending heaps of emails." Fair enough. But a few days later, she set up a security code. That immediately caught my attention, as she'd never used one. When I casually asked why, she gave a vague reply about online protection and intruders. They didn't press it, not wanting to appear distrustful, but it felt fundamentally wrong. The changes persisted. She started answering calls away from me, a new behavior. It wasn't faint either. Her phone would ring and she'd say, "Oh, let me just grab this," before vanishing into the bedroom or onto the patio. If I inquired who called, she'd simply reply, "Just a coworker." Then I observed another new habit, keeping her phone face down on surfaces. I hadn't realized that was even a thing until I reached across to hand her something, and she hastily swept the device out of the way. It was a blink and you miss it moment, yet it stuck with me. The changes weren't exclusively centered on the phone. She began to feel detached. Discussions that used to flow freely now felt like an uphill battle. If I introduced topics about the future, like, where should we go for our anniversary, or should we start saving for a different car, she'd simply nod and say, "Yeah, we'll see," before diverting the conversation. It all converged on a typical Wednesday. She informed me she was meeting a pal for coffee after her job. That wasn't unusual. She did that occasionally. I happened to be running errands nearby, so I thought, why not surprise her? It would be sweet. When I arrived, however, she wasn't with her friend. She was standing in front of the cafe, pacing, her phone pressed to her ear. I remained in my car because her manner of speaking sounded intense. I didn't mean to overhear, but I caught phrases like, "It's almost finalized," and "a new beginning soon." My stomach clenched. I couldn't decipher what she meant, but it didn't sound like work or a friend's quarrel. It sounded monumental, like a strategy she had crafted. When she got home, I asked how her coffee date went, trying to maintain a normal tone. She fabricated a detailed story about her friend complaining about a boyfriend. That evening, I was preparing a sandwich in the kitchen, and she was looking at her phone when she remarked, "Have you given more thought to coordinating our bank matters? Like, do you know where all the account information is?" I lowered the knife and turned to face her. "Okay, what's going on?" I asked, attempting to keep my tone mild but firm. "You've been bringing up our finances a lot lately. Is there something we should discuss?" She finally looked up, startled that I had challenged her. "No, nothing is amiss," she quickly replied. "I just think it's important, that's all. You know, for emergencies." "Emergencies like what?" She shrugged, her expression impassible. "I don't know, just life events. It's no big deal, I promise. I just think it's something we should organize." Her response felt evasive, too imprecise. I agreed and dropped the matter, but her avoidance of a direct answer made me more suspicious. It no longer seemed like a random suggestion. Felt like she was hiding something, but I had no clue what. So the next day, while she was at work, I decided to examine our accounts. I logged into our shared bank account and found something unforeseen. Over the past month, a few minor withdrawals had occurred. Nothing huge, but modest sums that lacked a clear purpose. They weren't for bills, groceries, or anything obvious. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it indicated she was taking cash out for a reason I couldn't determine. I thought about confronting her, but an instinct told me to wait. If I was mistaken, I'd seem ridiculous. If I was right, I had to be cautious. It was consuming me, so I reached out to someone I trusted, an old university classmate who now works as an attorney. I recounted my findings, trying not to sound like a conspiracy theorist. "Look," he stated after my explanation, "I'm not confirming anything is definitively happening, but you're not irrational for wanting to be prepared. If you're worried about safeguarding your assets, now is the time to act. Better protected than sorry." He outlined the steps I could take, simple measures to ensure my finances were secure should the worst occur. her. I confess, taking such extreme steps felt unnatural. It felt like I was readying for something terrible, even though I wasn't certain what was wrong. But the more I considered it, the more logical it became. If she was truly up to something, and my suspicion was mounting, I needed to defend myself. It was a tough choice, yet this was about more than just money. It was about the life we had built. I compiled a list of everything I could transfer, and how to do it without arousing attention. As I typed, a heavy feeling settled in my chest. I had unreservedly trusted her for years, and now I was playing defense against the person I believed would always support me. Then, I contacted my mother and briefly explained why I needed her assistance. "I need you to hold on to some things for me for a while. It's nothing bad, just a precautionary measure to protect myself, just in case." She was silent for a moment, likely trying to decipher what I wasn't saying. "Are you all right?" Her voice was laced with concern. "Yeah," I lied. "It's just a safeguard. Nothing to worry about." She didn't press me, but I could hear the hesitation when she replied, "Of course, dear. Whatever you require." By the time Em arrived home, I had already commenced the process. I shifted the bulk of my assets, our cash, investments, and even the title to the house, into my mother's name. I left enough in our joint account to maintain appearances, but the rest was secured. She didn't notice a thing. She walked in, kissed my cheek, and asked if I wanted to watch a movie. I acted normal, but inside I was a wreck. A part of me felt terrible, like I had betrayed her trust, but another part felt relieved, like I was finally reclaiming command of a situation that had been spinning out of my grasp. Over the next 3 days, I tried to keep our routine ordinary. I didn't want her to suspect anything had changed. She seemed content, even unusually cheerful at times. However, instead of easing my mind, this only deepened my unease. If she was planning something, she was doing an excellent job masking it. What stood out was that she never mentioned the finances again. It was as if the topic had vanished from her thoughts. At first, I thought I had overreacted, and she had simply dropped the subject because it wasn't relevant. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized she was actively avoiding it, almost as if she was afraid to bring it up after I had challenged her previously. I made certain that every detail was ironclad. I reviewed the documents again, verifying every element of the asset transfers to my mother. The house, the savings, the investments, everything was now legally in her name, sealed in an unassailable trust. I even called her to confirm she possessed all the necessary documentation. 2 weeks elapsed, and everything seemed normal. Too normal, frankly. Then on a random Friday night, she asked me to sit down on the sofa, turned off the television, and said, "We need to talk." My stomach dropped. I knew what she was going to say before she spoke it. "I think we should get a divorce," she said, her voice so composed it sounded rehearsed. It wasn't angry or emotional. It was simply cold, as if she were telling me we were out of milk. I stared at her, unsure how to reply. As she articulated her rationale, she mentioned needing autonomy, wanting to discover herself, and feeling like she'd lost her identity in the marriage. Standard breakup cliches that explained nothing. But then she said something that struck a chord. "You know, I've made a lot of concessions for you over the years, and I don't feel you truly appreciate them. I deserve better." That last line stung. It wasn't just that she wanted out. It was that she framed it as if I owed her something, that everything was my fault, and she was merely claiming what was rightfully hers. As I sat there trying to process her words, a new question surfaced. Why now? Then she said something that made everything begin to make sense. "A friend of mine has been helping me gain perspective." "A friend?" I remained quiet, letting her speak, but my mind was racing. Who was this friend? Why were they so involved in my marriage? The way she said it wasn't casual. It sounded like someone had been encouraging her, convincing her that leaving me wasn't just a choice, but a tactic she needed to execute. I received the divorce documents that Monday. Let me tell you, they didn't just want to terminate the marriage. They aimed to seize everything, half the house, my savings, my assets, and the car. She wanted it all, plus some vague spousal support clauses that made little sense given her high salary. It appeared she expected me to hand over everything I had earned. I started investigating. I couldn't just ask her who she'd been talking to, so I had to be resourceful. I began with her social media. That's when I uncovered the pattern. A man named Jake consistently liked and commented on her posts. Nothing explicit, but enough to make me pause. I clicked on his profile. As I scrolled, I noticed something unusual. He posted a photo at the same cafe I'd seen her at weeks earlier, on the same day I overheard her discussing a fresh start. My gut twisted. It became evident that this was more than just a need for space. Someone else was involved, directing her decisions, and I was determined to find out why. I chose to address it in my own way. That Saturday, I drove to her apartment, building and parked a block away, intending to verify what I already suspected. A few hours later, she and Jake emerged. They weren't holding hands, but the way they walked, close, leaning in to talk, was sufficient. They got into his car and drove off, leaving me sitting there staring. I didn't follow them. I didn't need to. At that moment, it was obvious she hadn't just stopped loving me. She'd been preparing to leave with someone else. The first mediation session felt strained from the moment we sat down. Her lawyer arrived with a file so thick it looked like they were prosecuting a major corporation. He began listing her demands as if they were perfectly justifiable. Half the house, the money, my assets, the car, and even some nonsensical spousal support. I remained silent, pretending to listen, but I was waiting for my own attorney to act. When our turn finally came, he handed a bundle of paperwork across the table. "Before we proceed, I think it's essential for everyone to review these," he stated. Her lawyer took the papers and scanned them. His assured demeanor quickly crumbled as he flipped through the pages, his brow furrowing harder with each one. "What is this?" he demanded, looking up at my lawyer. "These documents show the transfer of all major assets into a trust under my client's mother's name," my lawyer calmly explained. "The transfers were finalized several weeks prior to the divorce filing, and the trust is completely legal and non-revocable." The room fell completely silent. Her lawyer looked at her, confused and angry. "You didn't mention this," he stated flatly. She snatched the papers and flipped through them, her face flushing. "This can't be real," she whispered, staring at the notarized signatures and dates. Then she turned to me, her expression shifting from disbelief to fury. "You planned this," she muttered, glaring as if I'd committed a terrible crime. "You knew I was going to file, and you set this up to ruin me." I didn't respond. I just sat there and let her connect the dots. The conference ended with her lawyer saying something about needing to rethink their strategy, but everyone in the room knew they had no viable moves left. As we exited the building, she pulled me aside in the hallway, her face a mix of rage and desperation. "This isn't finished," she added, her voice low. "You're going to regret this." I just looked at her and said, "I already regret trusting you. That's the only regret I have." Following the mediation, things degenerated faster than I had expected. She went into a complete meltdown. It started with the calls, incessant calls. When I didn't answer, the tone shifted. Her messages alternated between sobbing and screaming, accusing me of being greedy and malicious, blaming me for everything wrong in her life. I ignored it all. When the calls and texts failed, she began spreading rumors. Mutual friends told me she was claiming the divorce was a hoax, a big prank. The inconsistencies in her story quickly became evident. If it was a joke, why file official paperwork? Why hire a lawyer and make specific demands if it wasn't serious? Then the truth emerged, thanks to a mutual acquaintance. Let's call him Matt. A few weeks after mediation, he unexpectedly messaged me, saying he had something I needed to see. When we met, he pulled out his phone and showed me a series of text messages between her and Jake. Matt explained that he and Jake shared a mutual associate who had overheard their conversations. Apparently, this associate had grown concerned, especially when Jake began boasting about how he was helping her secure her future. The associate realized what securing her future truly meant, trying to financially destroy me. Feeling guilty about remaining silent, the associate took screenshots and sent them to Matt. The texts were devastating. She wasn't just venting to Jake about the divorce, she was actively plotting her next steps with him, and he was coaching her through them. One message from her read, "Once the settlement is secured, we'll have all we need. I just need him to agree to the terms." Jake's reply, "Don't waver. Make him feel guilty if you have to. He owes you. We'll start anew once you have the funds." This was not a misunderstanding or an emotional reaction to a failed marriage. This was a cold, calculated manipulation. The texts quickly circulated among our shared friends. Her narrative instantly lost all credibility. People who had been neutral or even supportive of her began to withdraw. By the time the divorce was finalized, she left with only her personal effects. Her lawyer quietly withdrew her claims after realizing there was no legal foundation to stand on. All her bold requests had dissipated under the weight of the documentation I had produced. The trust I had established with my mother was impenetrable. Jake seemed to vanish as soon as her plan unraveled. I wouldn't be surprised if he used her as much as she did me. Without Jake in her corner, her confidence plummeted. The calls and texts continued, but they became increasingly frantic. She wasn't accusing me anymore. She was begging, "Can we just talk, please? I'll do anything to fix this." I did not respond. It was too late to undo the damage. As for me, I kept the house, my savings, and something I hadn't felt in a long time, peace of mind. She is a chapter in my past that I no longer revisit, and the rest of the story is entirely mine to compose. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life life accounts happening around you.